So Key Action 3 is all about supporting policy reform. It enables organisations, policymakers and a range of other actors to become involved in strategic activities that will support policy reform across the EU in education, training and youth. Now, the ultimate aim is for these activities to help achieve the goals of the Europe 2020 strategy, ET 2020, which is the strategic framework for European cooperation in education and training, and also the European Youth Strategy. Under Key Action 3, the national agency is responsible for managing structured dialogue, meetings between young people and decision makers in the field of youth. The UK National Agency is a partnership between the British Council and Ecorus, and KA3 Structured Dialogue is being managed by us here at Ecorus UK. Other types of projects under Key Action 3, such as cooperation with international organisations, are managed centrally by the Executive Agency of the European Commission. Now, we won't be talking about these actions during the webinar today, but you can find out more information in Part B of the programme guide, and the specific pages you would want to look at are 183 and 184. Now, structured dialogue with young people serves as a forum for continuous joint reflection on the priorities, implementation and follow-up of European cooperation in the youth field. It involves regular consultations of young people and youth organisations at all levels in EU countries, as well as dialogue between youth representatives and policymakers at EU youth conferences organised by the Member States holding the EU presidency and during the European Youth Week. The structured dialogue focuses on a different overall thematic priority for each of its 18-month work cycles. Now, that's set by the Council of Youth Ministers. The thematic priority of the trio presidency, that's Netherlands, Slovakia and Malta, for January 2016 through to June 2017 is enabling all young people to engage in a diverse, connected and inclusive Europe. Ready for life, ready for society. Structured dialogue with young people is conducted around the current thematic priority at both national and EU level. In the Member States, the participatory process is organised and ensured by national working groups comprising, amongst others, representatives of youth ministries, national youth councils, local and regional youth councils, youth organisations, young people from diverse backgrounds and young researchers. The programme guide details the types of activities that can be funded under this action. Participating organisations can run a range of meetings which can include debate and information events linked to the activities of the European Youth Week, events simulating the functioning of the democratic institutions, meetings that offer space for the active participation of young people on issues which are relevant to the structured dialogue or the EU Youth Strategy, meetings that prepare the ground for official youth conferences run by the member state holding the presidency of the EU, any other meetings, consultations or debates between young people and decision makers. Now, you can look on page 185 of the programme guide, and this has a little bit more detail on what these other meetings can look like. Now, it is important that young people lead on the activities and that they are actively involved in all stages of the project, from preparation through to follow-up. Statutory meetings of organisations or politically influenced events, however, are not eligible for funding. Now, it's important to link your KA3 project to the overarching European priorities and to show the added value of carrying out your project on a European level. When doing so, it's important to keep the general objective of the Erasmus Plus programme in mind. Now, more information about this can be found in Part A of the Erasmus Plus programme guide, as well as the following important features of the Erasmus Plus programme. I'm going to list those. Firstly, Recognition and validation of skills and qualifications, for example, Youth Pass in the field of youth. Dissemination and exploitation of project results, for example, the use of the Erasmus Plus logo, as well as the Erasmus Plus project results platform. Thirdly, open access requirement for education materials, documents and media produced through Erasmus Plus. Fourthly, international dimension, that's to say cooperation with partner countries. Fifthly, multilingualism, by giving the young people the chance to pick up a few words in another language when they communicate with other young people abroad. Then we have equity and inclusion, for example, by facilitating the access to learners with disadvantaged backgrounds and fewer opportunities compared to their peers. And finally, protection and safety of participants, by making sure all participants are in possession of a European health insurance card. That's just an example, by the way. Now, please also have a look at the specific objectives for the field of youth on page 28 in the programme guide. For example, to improve the level of key competencies and skills of young people, to foster quality improvements in youth work, to complement policy reforms at local, regional and national level, and to support the development of knowledge and evidence-based youth policy, as well as the recognition of non-formal and informal learning. To enhance the international dimension of youth activities and the role of youth workers and organisations as support structures for young people, complementing the European Union's external action. So what is a Key Action 3 structured dialogue project? Projects funded under this action allow young people to get involved in dialogue with policymakers and stakeholder organisations. Projects aim to promote the active participation of young people in democratic life and to foster debate around the priorities set by the structured dialogue process and the renewed political framework in the youth field. The meetings and initiatives that take place in a KA3 structured dialogue project fall under the two broad categories of national or transnational youth meetings. These are also the two activity types that you can select in the application form. Structured dialogue projects include at least one organisation active in the field of youth from a programme country. However, projects that foresee international meetings need to include a minimum of 2 organisations from 2 different countries. Organisations from partner countries neighbouring the EU can participate, but only as partners. If 2 or more organisations are involved, one organisation applies for funding on behalf of the whole partnership and has overall responsibility for managing the funding if the application is successful. Now, structured dialogue projects last between 3 months and 2 years, and you will build your project budget from a series of contributions to unit and actual costs per activity up to a maximum budget of €50,000 per project. So once you have decided what it is you want to do, you've set up a partnership and thought about how to address different European priorities, you will need to complete the following 2 registration steps. Now, you'll need to register on ECAS first. Now, ECAS is the European Commission Authentication Service, and you will need to register here to use any type of external European Commission tool. We have a video guide on our website, which we'll talk through. We have a video guide on our website, which will talk you through how to do this, and you can find the link to it in your handout. You will then need to obtain a participant identification code, and they refer to this as being a PIC, to access the participant portal. Now, the participant portal is the single entry point for the electronic administration of EU-funded projects related to the Erasmus Plus programme. You will be prompted to provide information about your organisation, as well as upload documents relating to your organisation. Now, these documents are needed to prove the legal status and the financial capacity of your organisation, and it is essential that the information on these documents matches the information on the portal. Now, if your organisation already has a PIC, you should use that one and not create a new one. Now, please make sure all the information is still up to date. If your organisation doesn't have a PIC, and we'd really ask you to check that to be the case, you will need to obtain one. So if you're applying for a new PIC, please make sure you register on the correct participant portal. The link provided in the handout is for the Education, Audiovisual, Culture, Citizenship and Volunteering portal. Now that's the correct one you should use. However, if you were simply to search on the internet, you might come across the Research Participant portal, which I'm afraid is not the correct portal for Erasmus+. Now you can find further information about the application process in Part C of the programme guide. Now, if applicable, you will need to download the partner mandate templates from our website and have them filled in by your respective partners and signed by both parties. Now make sure that all the information, such as the name of your organisation, address and legal representative on the partner mandate, is identical to the information in the application form. Otherwise, the partner mandate will not be accepted. So after developing your ideas and the registration process, completing the registration process, you can move on to the application form. Now the application form is an eForm, and you'll need to submit it online by the applicant organisation by the deadline of the 2nd of February 2016. Now please keep in mind that this is a 11 AM UK time, as the deadline for applications is 12 AM Brussels time. Now you will need to use your PIC as well as your partner PICs to fill out the application form. Now, it's very important that the PIC information is correct, as it will be used throughout the life of your project, and it is your responsibility to keep the information up to date. To make sure you have the correct KA3 application form in front of you, you should check that it states, and it will be the call 2016, the round 1, and for the 2nd of February 2016 deadline. Now all applications submitted to the UK National Agency should be completed in English. We'll now go into the actual application form and run through it with you. As we go along, we'll show you how to complete some sections of the form, as well as giving you hints and tips based on feedback from previous application rounds. We'll be using a test application form for this exercise, so we cannot use applications from previous rounds due to data protection rules. Okay, so I'm just going to move now to the application form. Okay. Just bear with me just one moment before we move on. Okay, right, sorry about the delay, but hopefully you can now all see the application form in front of you as well. Okay. Now this application form, which is an eForm, is available to download from the Apply for Youth Dialogue funding page on the Erasmus Plus website under Key Action 3. And you should save it as a PDF to your PC. Now please check that you have downloaded the correct application form for the first round of 2016. And as mentioned on the slide, you can do this by checking the following. And I'm just going to scroll down on this application and show you the parts of the form that will give you the information that I'm just about to mention. So you'll be looking for key action, support for policy reform, action, stakeholder dialogue and policy promotion, action type, dialogue between young people and policymakers, and core 2016, and also round 1 for the application round. So you'll see from the application we are using the correct one. Now, as I go through the application form, I will use the scroll bar to scroll up and down the page to the relevant sections of the form. Now, I'll concentrate on hints and tips for each section of the form as we go through the sections, rather than describing all the information needed, and I will then concentrate on the sections dealing with project activities and budget, showing how these link to each other, as well as giving you some hints and tips on how to complete them. Now, you will need to select the language you are using to complete the application form from the drop-down menu, and for applications made to the UK National Agency, this should always be English. Now, if I just show you the drop-down menu there, and this is where you would select your language, and as I said, it needs to be English. Now, you'll also need to input your start date and choose the duration of your project, which will automatically fill in the end date for you. So if we see here, we have the start date I've entered there of the 1st of May, and a project duration of 12 months, and the field, actually the project end date, has already automatically populated itself. Now, the start date must be between the 1st of May and the 30th of September 2016. Now, moving on to section C. Now, this relates to participating organisations, and I've got a few hints and tips here for you. So remember, when you put in your PIC and your partner's PIC numbers, the information will automatically populate from the information in the participant portal. I can show you that hopefully by checking that PIC number. And there we are. The information is automatically populated. But check the details, and if you notice any details are incorrect for you or your partner, they'll need to be corrected in the portal, not here in the application form. Now, all participating organisations need to be identified in the application form, and you won't be able to add partners at a later stage. A good quality application includes specific details, so naming the key persons who will be delivering the project and their skills is a good idea. And you'll find there is space available as you scroll down. Now, you'll also need to explain how your organisation's previous experience of delivering projects or activities has contributed to developing the skills and knowledge needed for the activities you propose in your application. Now, include details of the young people your organisation typically works with in terms of the geographic location and any additional needs they may have, if you feel that this information is relevant. Please explain how the activities proposed in this application fit into other programs or activities you deliver. This will help the assessors understand what needs and expertise your organisation has, and this will make it easier to see the potential impact of the project on your organisation. Now, make sure it's clear from the description of each partner's work and expertise why they have been chosen to participate in your project. This applies to all partners, including smaller organisations which may be involved. Now, you'll see actually that each page of the application has a validation button. I'm just highlighting that down there. So you can check the information as you go through. So actually, I'm just going to click the validate button now, and lo and behold, yes, it's showing that there's something we need to look at. So if we click on there, it'll actually take us then to the field that is requiring to be amended. And just to confirm that clicking the validate button, it will highlight any mandatory fields which have been missed. Now, as you saw there, we needed to enter in a piece of information about the type of organisation. So if I scroll down, and we'll find what might be an appropriate item. There we are, non-government organisation, association or social enterprise. If I click on validate again, you'll see there again it's highlighted another field which needs to be updated. So we click on that and you'll see that the email address is incomplete. So just for the purpose of this demonstration, it's showing as a test email, but we'll just add in a remainder of a email address to make it appear how it should do. Okay, so I'm going to move down to section D now. There we are. I've got some hints and tips here. It's all about the description of the project. Now, show a clear link with the priorities of Key Action 3 and of the structured dialogue process by carefully considering the aims of Key Action 3, which are on page 185 of the programme guide, with regards to the structured dialogue process, as already mentioned. Now, the theme set by the EU presidency countries for the structured dialogue during the period January 2016 to June 2017 is enabling all young people to engage in a diverse, connected and inclusive Europe, ready for life and ready for society. You should also think about which of the general priorities for the field of youth listed in Part B of the programme guide are relevant. Now, explain the specific needs or issues your project will address based on a genuine needs analysis you or others have done in relation to the participants and policymakers you plan to involve. Describe the specific needs of specified participants and policymakers and show how your project will respond to these. It's very important that you should demonstrate how the young people you'll be targeting have actively helped shape the project proposal. Now, if you have listed any transnational partners, in the case of one or several transnational structured dialogue meetings, you should also link the needs addressed by the project to your partner country's situation. Now, this will back up your choice of partners. In case you are organising one or several national structured dialogue meetings, you'll still need to show that your project's priorities and activities contribute, directly or indirectly, to the structured dialogue process. Now, moving on here down to section E, participants' profile. Now, it's not sufficient to state the age and gender of your young people. You'll need to provide more specific information, such as ethnicity and the issues they face. The same will be for policymakers. You should define them and state their priorities or needs as clearly as possible. This information will have to be related to the aims of the project and the gaps it aims to address. Now, spend some time on the selection process of your participants, as this has been one of the areas requiring further detail, as shown by applications submitted in the previous round. You'll need to explain in detail what recruitment and selection processes you and any partners will undertake. For instance, how many participants you will involve, and how the processes will ensure the most suitable participants are selected whilst ensuring a fair process. Now, for more information about participants with fewer opportunities, please have a look at page 11 of the programme guide. When it comes to working with participants with fewer opportunities, you need to demonstrate that they are relevant to the objectives of your project. If you work with this target group, you should clearly describe their needs in the previous sections of the application. Your learning outcomes must also be clearly linked to the aims of your project and relevant to the needs of your participants. That's to say, agreed with both the young people and the decision makers. Now, pay particular attention to increasing young people's civic engagement and competencies for active participation in democratic life. Don't forget validation of learning outcomes, for example, by using YouthPass or ASDAN, A-S-D-A-N, for the UK. It's not sufficient to list them. You'll also need to explain how you are going to be using them. If you're not familiar with YouthPass, you can find out more information on page 273 of the programme guide. So I'm just moving down now on to the next section, which is section F, preparation. Now, some hints and tips for this particular section. Now, mention any preparatory activities that will take place before the start of your project activities, including practical arrangements and also including anything you have done so far before putting in your application. But please be reminded that funding cannot cover any costs made before the start date of your project. Moving on to section G, that's main activities. Now, one issue we've encountered is that some applications lacked detail in this section, which meant that it was not possible to confirm whether the activities were in line with the objectives of the project, to what extent young people were actively involved in all stages of the project, and whether the methods proposed were appropriate. So you will need to use all the space available and provide plenty of detail here, including, for example, who will actually deliver each activity, and the project management plans and administration around it. All activities will need to use non-formal learning methods such as workshops, role plays, outdoor activities or roundtables. So describe here not only the activities but also how the learning is expected to take place. In some applications received under the previous call, it wasn't always clear which non-formal learning methods would be used. Now, you'll need to demonstrate here how you have ensured that your methods and activities are relevant to your objectives, as well as the learning outcomes and impact you anticipate. Methods should also be suited to both the young people and the decision makers you will involve. Moving down to section G1, activity details. Now, we're going to cover this section in more detail as it relates to the activities which will feed into the budget. Now, it's very important to keep in mind that the data here will need to correspond to the data in the budget section, otherwise you will not be able to validate your eForm. Now, the activities that you will need to detail in this section are grouped under the two broad categories of national or transnational youth meetings. You should add a table for each meeting you plan to hold during your project and select a number of answers from the drop-down menus available, and I will demonstrate this now. But before doing this, I'd just like to highlight a couple of things to you. If you are organising national meetings, the activities should take place in the country of the applicant organisation. If you are organising transnational meetings, the activities may take place in any of the programme countries involved. This means that a partner from a partner country neighbouring the EU can be involved, but activities cannot take place in this country. Now, there is an exception. Only in duly justified cases, and if the main activity includes elements of dialogue with decision makers at European level, an activity can take place at the seat of an institution of the European Union. Now, that means Brussels, Frankfurt, Luxembourg, Strasbourg, or The Hague. Now, you need to annex a completed activity timetable for each activity. This is an Excel file available to download from the Erasmus Plus website on the How to Apply Key Action 3 Structured Dialogue page. Make sure that the activity timetable is consistent with the narrative and activities detailed in the application form, for example, in terms of duration of the activities. You'll need to make sure all details match, as inconsistencies could weaken the score for your application. Now, you will need to use the distance calculator to fill out the distance band. A link to this is provided in your handout. The distance is from cities and towns, so choose the nearest one to your head office and the head office of your partners. The band accompanies the band which you will need to input into the application form. This will then automatically populate with the unit cost. This cost is a contribution towards the return journey costs. Please ensure that you put in the right band, as this will be checked at assessment and, if incorrect, could affect the quality of the application.
Okay, so I will talk you through the information Adrian is inputting into the form at the moment. So as you know, Adrian has selected national youth meetings from the drop-down menu and selected UK as the country. As already mentioned, you can also choose transnational youth meetings. To work out the correct distance band between the venue and the beneficiary organization, we will switch to the distance calculator. So the distance calculator works by inputting the town or city that will be the point of departure and arrival for the meeting. Our test organization is based in Birmingham, and the meeting venue is in London. As you can see, Adrian starts to type the name of the locations, and the distance calculator suggests locations. Clicking the calculate button provides the distance in kilometers, and it is this number which dictates which distance band you need to select. Adrian will now switch back to the application form to input this information. So Adrian has selected the distance band that matches the distance calculator. The start and end date need to be selected by clicking the arrow and using the calendar that pops up. If you just type the date, it might not be correct in the correct format and the form might not validate. So as you can see, Adrian just selected start and end dates. And now, if any travel days will be included, you will also need to input the number of days. As you can see, we have input 1 travel day. You will then need to input the total number of participants, which includes any accompanying persons if needed. Adrian has input a total of 50 participants, which includes 45 young participants. Just 1 second, and I will input this data now, and 5 accompanying persons. If your project will include participants with special needs or fewer opportunities, you should include the number of these here as well. You can also use a plus symbol to add more flows for an activity, and the symbol minus to remove the flow in the list. You can also add new activities and remove them by using the Add Activity and Remove Activity buttons.
Thank you, Natalia, for talking through that demonstration I've just done. I hope people found that useful. Now we're just moving down now to section H, follow-up. Now be as specific as possible about the impact of the project in addressing the needs you have identified earlier in the application. Now, one area that's not always well developed in applications submitted last year is impact at local, regional, national, European and/or international levels. Projects under Key Action 3 should aim to make a long-lasting impact beyond those directly involved by working with organisations that are actively engaged with young people at a local level or above. Now, it's important, therefore, that you describe the impact of your project at various levels or policy making. An example could be policymakers being able to better engage with young people. For dissemination, you'll need to show you have carefully planned your dissemination and mention what messages you want to share, what activities you'll undertake to do this, and when. You should be as clear as possible about who you will target with your dissemination activities. Now, plan for dissemination activities to take part throughout your project lifetime and not just at the end. Have a look at Annex 2 of the Programme Guide, which provides practical guidance on the dissemination of your project. Now, don't forget your evaluation activities. Now, these should consider the learning outcomes and how the project has contributed to addressing the overall aims of Key Action 3. Now, detail the qualitative and quantitative indicators of achievement that you plan to use in order to assess whether your project has achieved its objectives and results. You should attach numerical targets to quantitative indicators wherever possible and explain who will be looking after this task. I'm going to move down now to section I, budget. Now you will find more detailed guidance on how to complete the budget section of your application in our application guidance and in Part B of the programme guide. Getting the budget right is a quality criterion. Projects with a correct and duly justified budget are more likely to score high than those that do not. Now the maximum total grant available for any structured dialogue project is €50,000. So you cannot request more than €50,000 in the grant calculated field in section J.2.1. I'm just going to quickly go down the application form to show you that particular section. Just going down here, and there we are. That's the field where the total amount calculated will be demonstrated. Now, if the calculated grant amount is higher than €50,000, you will need to make adjustments under sections I2, I3, I4. Otherwise, it will not be possible to validate the application form. And I'm going to talk you through that those budget adjustments later. So if we just move back up to the budget section. Now it's important to note that the budget under all cost headings is built up on a unit cost basis per participant, except for exceptional costs and special needs support, which are budgeted for and reimbursed on the basis of actual costs. Now, just to explain about unit costs. Now, they can be understood as a set amount per participant, which is a contribution towards project costs. Now, for some unit costs, you'll spend more, and for some, perhaps you'll spend less than a unit cost. Now, unit costs are used to help make the funding simpler to understand and to manage. Now, actual or real costs, well, as the name indicates, now this is where you'll receive funding for the actual costs incurred. Now, real costs are used for the budget's heading exceptional costs and special needs support and can be fully or partly reimbursed. The budget categories for Key Action 3 structured dialogue projects are travel, organisational support, special needs support and exceptional costs. Under travel and organisational support, the budget is calculated on a unit cost basis. Now, your request for travel funding in section I.1 must be linked to the main activities you've detailed in section G1. Now, the country of destination should be the country in which the applicant or one of the partners, that's programme countries only, is based. The country of origin and destination will be the UK or any of your partner countries if you plan transnational youth meetings, and young people policymakers are being sent to the UK from countries in your partnership or vice versa. As mentioned, the exception to this are seats of the European Union. Now, most of the information has been pre-filled based on the information you've already entered in the activity details section. Now, the only part you can amend is the number of participants. Now I'm going to demonstrate that. You may recall during the earlier demonstration we'd entered in 50 as being the number of participants. If I can show you how we can actually change that field. Now in section I2 you'll need to request your grant for organisational support. That's money to be used for the organisation, management and implementation of your meetings or main activities. Now once again, most of this information has been pre-filled from the activity details section, so you'll only need to input the number of participants. Again, you may recall we had 50 entered earlier. I'm just going to change that number now. Now you'll need to check that the pre-filled information is correct, and if not, amend section G1. Now if I hit validate, you'll see it's identifying that we've exceeded the number of participants for the activity flow. So the figure of 60 actually it's not going to accept because it knows that we've only actually entered earlier a figure of 50. Okay, so So I'll change that figure now. I will click validate again. Okay. Right, it's just sending us into a different part, which we'll actually discuss later on, but we'll just go back down to the budget. But you'll see there it accepted that change. Go back to now. You'll also note that it's actually allowed us to validate the form, even though within section I.2 it had a would reduce the figure down. It actually allowed us to do that. So the form allows you to put in lower figures, but not higher figures than you would have already put in for activities. I'm just going to correct this now back to how it was, 50. Now, I mentioned earlier that if the total grant calculated is more than €50,000 in J 2.1, you'll need to adjust the number of participants in sections I1 and I2 to ensure that the grant calculated is €50,000 or less. Now, section I3 is a request for special needs support. That's any additional costs that your organisation or your partners would incur to enable participants with disability to take part in your meetings, for example, specialist equipment or accompaniment. Now, special needs support is calculated on an actual cost basis and will be assessed on a case-by-case basis. Therefore, it is important that you make clear in the description of cost box what items you need and the cost breakdown. You should also detail the participation of special needs participants in the main narrative of the application form. Now, section I4, this relates to exceptional costs. Now, these are budgeted as actual costs, and you need to clearly state in the description of costs box why you would need these items and the cost breakdown. Things that can be considered as exceptional costs under KA3 structured dialogue are, and I'll just give you a list of these. Firstly, costs connected to online consultations and opinion polls of young people, for financial guarantee and dissemination activities. And now for those particular costs, you can claim up to 75% of eligible costs. Also, expensive travel costs of participants from outermost regions and overseas countries and territories. Now that's up to a maximum of 80% of the total eligible costs. However, you will need to justify that the standard funding rules that's based on contribution to unit costs per travel distance bands do not cover at least 70% of the travel costs of participants. Also, other exceptional costs like visa and visa-related costs, residence permits and vaccinations, as well as costs directly related to participants with fewer opportunities. Now you can claim up to 100% of eligible costs. Now, it is important to make sure that if you have requested either special needs support or exceptional costs, that the total grant calculated, as shown in J 2.1, is no more than €50,000. Again, if this is the case, you will need to adjust the amounts requested. So some hints and tips. Make sure you have clearly described the main activities of your project and that the budget you request is consistent with your description, because budget requests can only be accepted if it is clear what the money is being requested for. As a reminder, a person with special needs is defined under Erasmus Plus as a potential participant whose physical, mental or health-related situation is such that his or her participation in the project would not be possible without extra financial support. Now I'm going to scroll down to section J, project summary. Now this summary will be used by the European Commission and the national agency in their publications and may also feed into the Erasmus Plus project results platform. So this should be kept in mind. It should be written in clear, plain English, avoiding any technical or sector-specific jargon to ensure that it is understood by the general public. Section J1. This is the summary of participant organisations, the budget summary and the project total grant. Now check that the information is absolutely correct. So in case it's not, you can make any necessary changes in the earlier sections. So just to reiterate, you'll need to make sure your grant request does not exceed €50,000. Now if we move down to the annexes, I'm just going to talk a little bit about those. There we are. Now, compulsory annexes are the signed declaration of honour, the scanned mandates of each participating organisation to the applicant, signed by both parties, and completed timetables of activities. Now, these documents can be downloaded from the Key Documents section of our Apply for Youth Dialogue funding page on the Erasmus Plus website. Your project application will be ineligible without the first of these attachments, and that's the Declaration of Honour and the signed mandates. The lack of a completed timetable of activities will mean that your application will receive a lower score under Project Management and Implementation, so please don't forget this. Now I'm just going to switch over to the timetable, and Natalia will be talking to you whilst I
So you will need to use the activity numbers from the application form, and all the information about the venue and duration should match the activity details section of the eForm. You can just bear with us a few seconds. We're going to just put the activity timetable. Hopefully you'll be able to see it in a minute on your screen. Okay, there you go. Thank you very much for your patience. So yeah, you should clearly detail the activities and methods used for each day of the activity, and this should correspond to the information in section G of the eForm. If you have multiple flows within one activity, you should put them all on the same sheet, and you can do this by just copying the table you see here, pasting it below and filling it for each flow. So Adrian will demonstrate that to you now. So as you can see, that's how you input the multiple flows. And if you have multiple activities, you can copy this table across to the next sheet and create as many sheets as you have activities. So Adrian will do this quick demonstration as well for you. And now we will switch back to the application.
Right, thank you, Natalia, for that. I hope it was useful to see the actual timetable to understand what it's actually about, what we've been talking about. Now, if there is still some room for attachments, once these 3 compulsory annexes are attached, you are able to attach other relevant annexes, such as a needs analysis and a sample work programme. A tip here is to keep it concise. Now, we expect that all the information which is key to the quality and content of your project should be included within the main body of the application form. Now, what we're going to do is just scroll back one direction. There we go. There we go. Down to submission. Now, a few final words on the submission procedure. Now, validate as you go through and after completing the application. Now, I'm going to do that now, and I suspect there might be a problem because we highlighted that earlier. There we are. Telling us that a field is mandatory, so we go to that. And yes, this is where actually we looked earlier. So I'm just going to just type in test here just to allow us to progress. There we go. We come back down to the submission section. As I've mentioned, you'll actually be taken, if you do hit validate, you'll be taken to any sections that are incorrect or have been missed. Now, you'll need to resolve those, as we've just done, before submitting the form. And I will just hopefully press validate now, and there we are. A big sigh of relief showing that it's valid. Now, refer to section K, the checklist, and read the data protection notice, and you can see section K. We'll just quickly go back up. There we are, there's the checklist. And you'll need to read the data protection notice. Ensure you are connected to the internet when you submit, and save the final completed version of your application form to your PC in case of any submission issues. Now, please note that the deadline mentioned in the form is Brussels time. The form needs to be submitted online by 11 AM UK time on Tuesday, the 2nd of February 2016. We would advise you to leave plenty of time to complete your application and to submit it online well before the deadline in case of any unexpected technical difficulties. That actually completes our look at the application form, so we're just going to move back now to the presentation. Right, now before we go any further, I think Natalia is going to be launching another poll for you, and that should be appearing on your screen soon.
Thank you all very much for your votes. So as you can see, 83% of you intend to submit your Key Action 3 application on the 2nd of April. So that's really good news. And please remember that as well, this year we have another 2 deadlines for Key Action 3. So if you are not considering to submit your application in February, you will still have 2 more deadlines this year. Thank you.
That's very positive news, and thank you very much for expressing your interest in putting an application, and thank you, Natalia, to share that with us. Now, we're just moving on to the next slide on our presentation. Now, once we've received your application, we do some preliminary checks. Now, it's important to note that your application will not go forward to assessment if, firstly, your start and end date, as well as the project duration, is not in line with the criteria specified in the programme guide. Now, you can refer to page 111, that's 111 in the programme guide. Similarly, it won't go forward if your budget contribution requested from Erasmus Plus is over €50,000. Also, if you do not have the minimum number of partners in the case of transnational meetings. And also, most importantly, that you submit your application after 11 AM rather, to be precise, on the 2nd of February 2016. As part of the assessment process, the national agency will also check that the requested budget is in line with the funding rules set out in Part B of the programme guide. If these rules are not respected, your requested budget may be reduced on assessment. Please make sure that you read the programme guide and the national agency's guidance available on our website for further details on the eligibility requirements before you submit your application. Now, the Erasmus Plus national agencies will be validating your organisation and also your partner organisations. This is a separate process to the assessment of your application. Therefore, the fact that your organisation has been validated does not automatically imply a successful outcome for your application. During the validation process, the national agency will check whether all the information you have put into the participant portal is complete and correct. We will check whether the required legal and financial forms have been uploaded, as well as the supporting documents. More information about this can be found in Part C of the Programme Guide, and that's starting on page 237. Your partners will also need to be validated by their national agencies. Please note, organisations that are not validated cannot take part in Erasmus Plus funded projects. If you or your partners cannot provide the correct and fully completed documents during the validation process, this may cause significant delays to the processing of your application and may even result in the national agency withdrawing its offer of funding if your application is successful. So, the maximum grant that can be awarded for a structured dialogue project is €50,000. Some key points to remember about the budget. The maximum grant that can be awarded for a structured dialogue project is €50,000. Contribution based on unit costs. Now, this is funding automatically calculated dependent upon the unit. This will be an amount per participant for a certain duration, or a set cost per distance travelled, for example. Budget headings using unit costs are travel and organisational support. Contributions based on real costs. Now, these budget headings using real costs are special needs support, and that's up to 100%, and exceptional costs. Under exceptional costs, you should distinguish between costs connected to consultations and opinion polls of young people, potentially online, costs for a financial guarantee or dissemination activities, and this is up to 75% of the costs. For expensive travel costs of participants from outermost regions and overseas countries and territories, you can request up to 80% of eligible costs, and any other costs under exceptional costs that can be remunerated up to 100%. Your budget should be appropriate to your activity and demonstrate cost-effective use of resources. Several of the budget lines are conditional on you demonstrating added value, and you will need to clearly justify, especially for real costs, why you are requesting a certain amount of funding. For example, the costs of an opinion poll should be justified, adequate resources used, and costs should be limited to a realistic number of respondents. Now, the following documents need to be annexed to the application form. The declaration of honour signed by the legal representative mentioned in the application, the mandate of each partner to the application signed by both parties and with the information identical to the information about the partners in the application form, and the timetable of activities template. We recommend that, where possible, you scan different documents together into a single file. If, after checking that the annexes are within the size and file format limits, you are still experiencing problems with attaching annexes, you can email them to erasmusplus@ecorus.com, clearly stating which application form they relate to, by providing the application hashcode and your organisation details and project name, but please also only do this as an exception and ensure that you have followed all the available guidance. Now, you must ensure that you have validated all sections of the application form before submitting. Now, you'll also need to ensure that you are connected to the internet in order to submit your completed application. And you should also ensure that all sections of the form are valid and all annexes are attached before submitting the form. If there are any technical issues preventing the form from being submitted, it will say error under status. If this happens and you are unable to submit the form, you should follow the alternative submission procedure. In this case, you can still submit your application by sending it via email to us within 2 hours of the official deadline. However, the UK National Agency will only accept applications via the alternative submission procedure if the error message is recorded under status in the submission summary section of the eForm with a timestamp prior to or on the deadline date and time. Now, the following error messages are not accepted as technical issues, and you'll see them on the screen. I'll take each one in turn. ERR01. This error relates to invalid data, missing fields in the eForm. Now, this is not considered to be a technical issue and can be rectified by the applicant by correcting the application form and validating it again. ERR06. Now, this error means that there are errors with the annexes. That could be, for example, the total size of the attachments exceeds 5 megabytes or are not in the accepted file format specified in section N. This can be rectified either by reducing the size of the attachments or by removing them. Now, you'll also see there the error code of unknown. Now, this means that the eForm was not submitted and no submission attempts were made. Now, the local 01 error code, that means the Adobe Reader security is enabled. Now, in order to submit the eForm, you must click the appropriate options in the yellow security warning bar at the top of the form. And finally, local 02. That relates to a network connection error. And in order to submit the eForm, you should check your internet connection and try to submit the form again, or try a different network connection. Now, before we conclude, there are some key points for you to remember. Before and while you complete your application, refer to the Commission's documents, first of all the Programme Guide, and the National Agency's own guidance available from our website. If you have applied before, don't forget to review the feedback you have received from us, as it will include the key areas of improvement, which will enhance your chances of submitting a good quality application. Now, save the form frequently so no information is lost. Ensure correct options are selected on the application so that important sections aren't deleted. As I've said while looking through the application form, double check that the budget you request is accurate and well justified, and that you respect the maximum amounts allowed. Before and while you complete your application, refer to the Commission's documents, first of all the Programme Guide, and the National Agency's own guidance available from our website. If you have applied before, don't forget to review the feedback you've received from us, as this will include key areas of improvement which will enhance your chances of submitting a good quality application. Provide relevant answers to the questions in the application, but remember that there is a character limit on many of the sections. Now, you can see the limit by hovering your mouse over the answer boxes. Get someone else to proofread your application and annexes, perhaps against the published award criteria. And please leave enough time for completing and submitting your application before the deadline of the 2nd of February. Okay, so just moving on now finally to next steps. So to conclude, I'd like to remind you of the support that the UK National Agency will be offering in the run-up to the 2nd of February deadline for applications to be submitted under Key Action 3. Now, a recording of this webinar will be sent to you in the next couple of days. After this webinar, you will be redirected to a feedback form. Now, please do fill this out, as we aim to continuously improve these webinars and have taken previous feedback on board when creating the webinar for this particular round. A detailed guide for applicants on how to fill out and submit the application form is available on our Erasmus Plus website. If you haven't already done so, please do sign up to our newsletter, as this will provide all the most up-to-date information about the core and about the Erasmus Plus programme. On our website you can find other important information and documents, for example the timetable of activities, so we recommend you refer to these. We also have a helpline where our team is available to answer your questions about the Key Action 3 application that you may be submitting. So thank you for your attention and participation. We'll be around for a few more minutes to answer any final questions via the chat box, and if there are any more that come up, please contact us via the erasmusplus@ecorus.com email address or the number on this screen. Now, our team is also available every day from Monday to Friday to answer any queries you may have via email or via our helpline. You can see the number on the slide, and you can also find it in your handout. If there are any questions we haven't managed to answer during the session this afternoon, we will get back to you by email afterwards. Do also keep an eye on the Erasmus Plus website for news and further guidance. And we hope that you found this session useful today, and we wish you luck with your future applications.